User interface design, chapter 16, CSE 5325. We are going to discuss the main issues about user interface and how to design a good user interface. So that's a very important chapter. There is also a video on Don Norman, which I'll ask you to compliment and watch it, and we'll consider it. So where is the user interface? Well, first of all, there is a model called CHAM model. So CHAM basically separates presentation and dialogue from application. So more recently, we also have a model called MVC, Model View Controller. So I'd like to go ahead and discuss these models with you today. So first of all, let's just continue on this. This is the CHAM model. Basically, CHAM model consists of three parts: presentation, dialogue, and application. So just rotate myself a little bit. Okay, you might not see me well, but at least I'm more comfortable and the video is also good. So I really want you to focus on the slides as opposed to me, so that's probably a little bit better. So CHAM is actually a location where they get together once in a while to discuss user interface. And that's really important because when you design a user interface, often people think, well, there's an application and there is a presentation layer, so I need to use that. Or anything has an interface. Actually, there's a claim, I mean, there's no fact check on it, but about 40 to 50% of the code written is to deal with user interface. Okay, think about anything you do is user interface. You go to pump gas, is a user interface. You go to an ATM machine, is user interface. You go to MyMath to register for courses, is user interface. So about half of the stuff you do is always user interface. So you typically have an application, say ATM or MyMath, and a presentation layer, which is whether it's a keypad or whether it's just a bunch of, select course, select semester. But what is this dialogue in the middle? Well, that's the most important thing it's really about the user interface. So think about it. I'm going to give you a sort of an analogy. Imagine you're sitting in a very comfortable room, okay, and you have your favorite, TV shows on and sofa and favorite drinks and food. So you're actually watching. So think of the application is watching the TV and the presentation is where you're sitting in the room, you're watching it. Okay, everything's perfect, right? If nobody bothers you, probably you'll hang around there for days. You become a couch potato watching movies and eat and drink. But let me throw a little dialogue in there. All of a sudden, I will make a phone call to you and says, oh, by the way, the room you're sitting in, the door is locked. You cannot leave that room. Okay. All of a sudden, the same setting, the same environment that you felt so good, it was so comfortable, and you wasn't going to leave that room for many days, becomes like a prison. You cannot tolerate it for more than 1 minute. You try to run. You try to say, okay, get me out of here. Okay. So that is the basic concept. So dialogue is the way you feel. Have you noticed sometimes you have an application, two applications. One is very successful. Another application with the exact same content, even better, is very failure because of the dialogue, the feel that you get. If people feel uncomfortable, trapped, they will. Earlier days, like in 80s, when ATM was about flourishing, the system was designed somehow. Of course, as a presentation, which is a keypad, and the application was the ATM application to get money, transfer money, etc. But the dialogue, it was very hard. The moment you put your card and PIN, unless you've selected money and walk through the normal path, it was very difficult. And if you made a mistake, it would suck your card in. Like they say, well, invalid card, go see your banker. Or if you, for example, made any, say, more than 2 or 3 time password, which often you forget it, or you may, fat finger your password. But the biggest problem also was there was no easy way out. Let's say you go there and you change your mind. You don't want to withdraw money. it wasn't as easy to get out. So these issues, so people would feel, oh my God, I may not have the right pin or right pin for the right card, or I don't want to do something. So people just started avoiding ATMs because they said, oh, I don't want to lose my card, especially if you imagine if you're in a different city, okay? And say on a weekend you're visiting on a Friday, sucks your card in, you have to get stuck there until Monday, until the bank opens and go somehow get your card. So the dialogue was very negative. People felt like it's like the door is locked. People didn't use it. And ultimately they fix these problems. Right now, at any point you could say clear or cancel. You press a button. Days they didn't have a clear or cancel. They just said proceed, proceed. So it wasn't as obvious unless you were very keen and noticeable. And then they nowadays, if you notice, even if you put your card in times wrong, it gives your card back. Actually, to be clear, another issue with ATM was often about 5% of the times people left their card in because the money came and then the card came in. And nowadays, notice what you do before it gives you the money. Either you put your card and pull it out, or it gives your card first. This way, you're not going to leave without getting your money, so the card comes first. So they fixed the dialogue. So dialogue is the most important thing. It's not just your application and presentation, it's the feel that you give to the people. So I'm going to later on, one of this experts in the field, his name is Don Norman, is one of my heroes, by the way. And I have a video which he talks about visceral feeling and, many other things, which is extremely part of the exam. I'm going to ask you to watch that video. And in that one, you'll see how things make you feel, how things maybe functionally full of content or not, but the presentation or the dialogue within that application is there. For let me wrap it up by one more example. When Steve Jobs, okay, God bless his soul, one of the pioneers, he when they told him, what do you want to people have when they feel they have an Apple phone or iPhone? He says, I don't care. All phones are phones. Right? Samsung is a phone and Nokia was a phone those days, and Apple and etc. He said, I want to pass the message of chic. Anybody who carries an Apple phone, that means I made it. I am chic. I'm up to date. And as you can see, he got it. It's just that the dialogue, because the application is a physical phone, right? And it does the same thing. I mean, I'm not sure if there's a much difference between a Samsung phone versus an iPhone these days, right? But the message Apple or iPhone gives you that, oh, I'm with it. I am, I have an iPhone, so therefore I am more up to date. Therefore I'm richer. Therefore I'm more chic. So that's the dialogue, and actually, dialogue sells. So when you do your user interface design, you should not just think of presentation and application. Think about the dialogue as well. Unfortunately, computer scientists, I am one of them, we are really worried about the application presentation. What are the edit boxes and list boxes and the content and all that stuff. But ultimately, we have to bring people with a lot of arts majors. So in some of my classes, I actually collaborate with digital arts. And I bring some of their students to help with the projects, especially hands-on project. And they bring enormous value because the things we don't think, the colors, the feel, red is always, aggressive color versus yellow or blue is much calmer. So do you want your application having a calming effect? Don't make it red. Do you want an application to have a very fast and active effect? Make it more orange or red. So these are the sort of the feels that I was telling you about. The dialogue your application will pass. So this is called the CHAM model. CHAM has nothing to do with any person's name. It's a person. It's a location in near Alp in Europe. That's where the conference typically takes place, and therefore they introduce the dialogue. It's not just the presentation; it's the application. There's also another model called MVC. This is a very popular model, which is called input output dialogue model, basically. So this is pretty much vanilla flavor. You have an input to anything. In here you have your dialogue, an application, and there goes the output. So pretty much you take the CHAM model, give some input, make sure you add the dialogue, and there comes your output. Okay, so that is very, and remember you're gonna have a lot of views. For example, think of your phone. Since I use an application, let's say three of us, okay, me and two of you, will buy iPhone, the latest iPhone, like today out of the box, exactly the same color, same shape. But within 2 weeks, your phone will look totally different than my phone. I probably set my phone with I check my emails a lot. I do a lot of stock market checking. I do things. So my front page is going to look different. Okay. And maybe I have my picture of my kid. But versus you might have a picture of your boyfriend, your girlfriend, or the favorite location, and then you're going to have more games on it. So actually it takes your own view. So notice this might be my view, this might be your view, this might be somebody else's view. So all of them is the same device, the same equipment. It's just it has a different model view controller. It's just we set it up the way we want it. And that's the way it should be. Our PCs, same manufacturer, but we organize it in different ways. Okay, so what is user interface? Okay, user interface is all aspect of a system that are relevant to the user. Okay, anything that's relevant to the user. It is not just pressing keys and entering data. It's even the feel that you get. If you watch an application and makes you aggressive or make you calm, that's actually part of user interface. Anything that makes you interact and your mood, your setting. This is also called a user virtual machine. So when I told you about the iPhone having, you set your phone with your favorite games on the front, I set it with my favorite stock market application. That is a user virtual machine. It's the same machine, but your virtual machine is different from my virtual machine. So a system can have more than one UVM, of course, as I mentioned. Okay, one for each set of tasks or roles. In olden days when I worked for corporate, we used to actually have the same phone, but I would configure it that it would be one sort of view or set for my business and one view for my personal. So on one page I had all my personal application, photo gallery and all my stock things. On the other one, I had all my appointments and all my schedules and stuff like that one. So you could even on your own device have two UVMs, like one for this, one for the other. So an individual may also have more than one user interface to the same application, as I just mentioned right now for you. Okay. So there are two ways to look at a user interface. One is from a design perspective. One is from a human perspective or aspect. From a design, how to design everything relevant to the user, of course, what you put in the system. From the human aspect, what does the user need to understand? So that's the basic sort of a difference between them. So let's look at the human factors. These are things like humanities, artistic design, ergonomics. Okay, humanities is really your psychology. How does one perceives, learns? Okay, I told you, for example, if this application is for older people versus younger people, the tone has to be maintained. Is the application is for more computer savvy people, or is it more for people at home? They might be very smart, but the lawyer is not as smart as you when it comes to computer fields. So organizations, cultures, a lot of artistic design, a lot of graphic arts, a lot of cinematography, motion pictures, anything that actually entices your basically user to make a better application, so makes more demand or more of a one-on-one face-to-face communication with your user when you use it. And of course, ergonomics, relationship between human characteristic and artifacts. For example, you design the keyboards a little bit more friendly so you won't have, your wrist hurts, or your phone have more space. Nowadays with the new Samsung, you could open up. In case you want it, it becomes a little bit wider or bigger as far as that goes. Okay, so let's continue. So there are models in HCI. One we call it internal model, one we call it external model. So internal models is models for execution, for developers. External model is for users, for communication. So for example, internal model has mental model, model of a system held by the user, and user model, model of user held by the system. So for example, have you noticed, what do you usually do when you design a system? You have a lot of cookies. Have you noticed if you ever on your phone or your PC, you start searching for something? Let's say you search for, I don't know, favorite restaurant. or a Mexican restaurant, or you're looking for a vacation resort. All of a sudden from now on, because it generates cookies on your computer, you're going to have a bunch of ads exactly for the genre you were looking for. So this is actually the model of user held by the system. The system knows, hey, you're in a mood for vacation, or you're in a mood for, say, Chinese food. So that sort of sorts it out. But external model is model of human information processing. So how does human process information? This is more of a conceptual model. We also call this one task action grammar. So I'm going to show you this one. This is how, for example, human information processing works, right? So you basically think of this as your head and this is your eye. So you have long-term memory and then you have working or short-term memory. And this is sort of your central executive. This is your CPU, right? This is, you look at something, your US, I notice I didn't say eyes, I said input, because the smell is also a form of input. Hearing is sort of input. Eyes are sort of input. You take that one, your processor gets that signal and then first goes to your short-term memory to see, have you had this setting before and how did you behave based on that one? Okay, for example, if you saw, let's say, okay, I use an example here. Let's say when you were a little kid, like 1 year old, and you don't know fire is bad. Okay, it's pretty, it's flameful. So the moment you look at it, you see the beautiful color and feel the heat. You go to your memory as a kid. Well, you're a tiny baby, so you don't have any recollection of short or long-term memory. So you touch it. What happens? You're gonna burn your hand, right? So when you burn your hand, you know it's really bad. So you register that one as a long bad event. So you put it in your short memory. Then on, after a while, it goes to your long-term memory. So what's gonna happen? The next time you see fire, you're really sort of afraid of it, right? Because you see the fire, goes to your short-term memory, and it's subconscious without you thinking about it, and immediately you feel, oh my God, I'm gonna burn. So you sort of stay away. Have you noticed people who are afraid of flying, people who are afraid of elevators? You don't know what happens to them. For example, are afraid of a swimming pool. Sometimes down the road, maybe when they were a child, when they were 1 year old or 2 years old, maybe they were in an elevator. And what happens? The elevator got stuck. They were there for 3 hours and nobody to rescue them. And their parents were there. They were panicking. So it registered as a very bad event. Now, 45 years later, you don't know that event. But you're afraid of elevators. Every day you're afraid of elevators. This is actually what psychologists work on, to find out your fears. And your fear is really, we are really like artificial intelligence is built based on that. Information, when you're born, is totally blank. And then we start registering events. That's why they say, have you noticed the power of positive thinking? The power of being always forward looking and always ignore the issues is because you register it. And if you're a negative thinker, over the years, anything input you get it, you will associate it with something bad. And all of a sudden, the output is panicking, or the output is, I hate something. Or I have people who are so afraid of, for example, eating seafood, or they have a xenophobia, they don't want to deal with foreigners. A lot of these things, because it's not their problem at the moment. At some point, okay, they've either heard it or they have experienced some bad thing. This is the learning process. So now that you know this, okay, you're going to create an environment, a system, to leave a positive impression of your application to the user. So when your user uses your app, you want them to feel happy. That's why you may have a really nice color in the background, or some joy, something that people register your application as good. Oh, I like it. I like to go to this restaurant. I like to use this application or this website. Okay. And then on, you're going to have a lot of hit. And that's the difference between an application having 1,000 hit in a month and an application having 10 million hit a month, right? So that is basically the effect that we talk about it, that the human learning. Nowadays, if you notice, when people who get Alzheimer's, what happens? Typically, their short-term memory goes, and after a while, the long-term memory goes. So typically, this our brain is very simple. We have a central processing unit, is brain, and then we have short and long-term memory. So that is how we could set up user interface to leave a positive impression on things. Okay. So use of mental models. So planning the use of technology. So we always want to do what's called search, first search by author's name, and then fine tune it, okay, user action while executing the task. Refine search in case of too many hits. Evaluate the results because mind is very linear. So have you noticed if you search for something, if it gives you ton of stuff at the same time, you get confused. But if you give a piece at a time, say, okay, first search by the author. Okay, you'll. It's kind of like, let me use a different example. Let's say you want to buy a house. The first time you want to go look for a house, the agent who's taking you, is a smart agent, should not try to find you a perfect house. The first view should be finding out what genre of a house do you like. Do you like Cape Cod? Do you like South American style? Do you like modern style? Do you like British? So a good agent the first time doesn't even care what you say. It just takes you to 6 different houses, one contemporary, one British, one Cape Cod, one, they call it Southeast. And then when you walk in and immediately knows your first impression, your first search is that, oh, this person only wants modern houses. So even a house that is, British style and very elegant, you're not going to like it because of your first search, right? Then we refine that one. Then on the next trip you go there, you're going to show them a bunch of only contemporary houses, right? So this is how we do this one. Only contemporary houses, and then from there we sort of refine it further. So we basically accept slow response times in the morning. For example, cope with events while using the system. So notice that one. The time of the day, this is actually deep learning, a lot of machine learning. Typically you're a little slower when you wake up as opposed to, in the peak of the evening. So your application should adjust. This is all the dialogue. Okay, so don't bombard someone when they open up your application the first thing with lots of ads. Let them do this. If you don't believe me, watch your YouTube. People think it's business. It's really not. Like, you could watch a YouTube way at night. People have less mental capability to deal with a lot of commercials versus during the day they've already had their breakfast, they're running around, so you see a lot more of them as you go. Or some other fields, like for example, when you go to Google, okay, let's say you search for something, okay, what do you usually see? Google has two O's, Google, right? But if you search for something and brings you a ton of results versus you search for something that just brings you one page of results, Google has this really nice feel of showing it. If it brought a ton of results, it always puts a lot of O's in the Google. And we notice when you search it, all of a sudden the Google says G-O, like 5 O's or 6 O's. That is actually a user interface. That tells the user that, oh, you have a ton of results for this, as opposed to just, the bare minimum of 2 O's, which is the known one. So these are all tricks. So I want to talk about Don Norman. Okay, Don Norman, as I said, I have a 10-15 minute video, which I'll give you the link. I won't play it because you could play it on. Typically in the classroom, I play that one at this point. But Don Norman is a genius in user interface design and really on the dialogue part of it. So his ideas are, this is a very important slide, by the way, that characteristics of mental models, like people's perception, say they are very incomplete. Okay, people, they don't have a full view of things. They can only partly be run. A lot of times, a lot of ideas that you have about something, they're not all applicable. Only part of it applicable to something. They are often unstable, the view or the characteristics of the mental model. They have vague boundaries, and they are extremely parsimonious. They pay the attention to a lot of details, and there are also a lot of superstition, which means we have things which affects us. For example, you walking out of your home and all of a sudden you sneeze. In some countries, like in Persia, you don't leave home because sneezing means something bad about to happen. Or you see a black cat, or you see a number 13. These are all superstitions. Okay, so people's behavior are not normal. That is the difference between AI with robots and human. A robot is extremely predictable. You give them the same set of input, it always behave same output. But human don't. The same input today, I behave differently. For example, I'm going to teach you a trick. Never ask your boss at work for a favor on a Monday or Tuesday, because your boss is Monday or Tuesdays are really crappy days for management. They just came the weekend, they had fun, or they have to deal with 5 more days of this. They're always behind when the week starts. Always ask your favors on Fridays because people are happier. Oh, I'm almost done for this week, right? So if you ask your boss on a Monday afternoon, hey boss, can I have next week off? Most likely he'll tell you no. But if you ask him the same question on Friday, most likely he'll tell you yes. Same question. I want to take some days off, right? So that is basically what I'm telling you. People behavior is up, and this is natural because human, we have a soul. It's not just logic, right? Right? We always think people have left brain and right brain. Left brain is mathematics and logic. So AI machines are all AI, all left brain, because it's all formulas and math and the history of events. Versus right brain is more like hard feelings, more artistic things. And notice our society is built on this one. So think of, there's actually a lot of good papers in that area. If you look at the whole world around you, there are two types of professions: the ones that are necessary and the parts that are just bring you joy. For example, the necessary is sort of the left part. You need doctors, you need agriculture, you need food, you need transportation, right? These are necessary because you want to go from point A to point B, or you're going to go see a doctor, or you need to eat, right? So you need agriculture. But you also have the things that are not necessary but more important, like music, right? Music is not really necessary. If you don't have it, nothing will happen. Vacations is not really necessary. Okay, love. Okay, so they say it's not really necessary. It's right, but that is actually what the beauty is. The dollar comes in, right? So your heart says something, which is the right side of your brain, but your logic says no to do this one. So this is why we become incomplete. So that's why they ask your boss on a Friday as opposed to Monday, because you always have this duality between your left and right side of the brain. Don Norman explains it very well, and it becomes there. Actually, when you watch Don Norman's video, I'll give you exam question based on that video. Types of feelings. Okay, the first one is visceral, and I let you watch the rest of them. I always give you one or two questions from that video. Hint, hint. Okay. All right, so let's talk a little bit more conceptual model. Conceptual means all that is model as far as is relevant to the user. Okay. Formal models, or some models, the user's knowledge, other focus on interaction process. So formal models are pretty boring stuff. Password must be 8 characters. You must have, alphanumeric, numeric, and wild character. All those things we put. These are really formal definitions. But a lot of things, all as modeled as far as is relevant to the user. So we have formal stuff and also not so formal, I left side of the brain and right side of the brain, the things that you really need it and the things that makes you feel better about it. You need to have both of them. A good life is when you can listen to good music, have a good relationship with your wife or your girlfriend or boyfriend, but also you have a good job. Imagine if you have a wonderful job but you don't have a good relationship or a good, no matter how rich you are, you're not fulfilled, and vice versa. You could have a beautiful, people say, I have everything I need. I love I'm with the one who I love, and I listen to my music, but I'm dead poor. I don't buy this one. You need to have both sides of it in balance to be able to proceed. So, so what are some of the viewpoints of conceptual model? One we call a psychological view, which I just explained a whole lot about it. Another one is called linguistic views. This is the definition of the dialogue between the user and the system. So what language is best understood? And linguistic doesn't mean British versus Chinese versus Japanese. It means the lingo you use. For example, if I try to give the same lecture to a bunch of high schoolers, I probably use different terminology. Or when I want to talk about um, to certain elderly group, I use a different. So this is linguistic part of it. You adjust your tone. And remember, when you do your tone, you have to know, they always say there's a few different motives from your application, from what you do. Sometimes you talk or you present an application, your purpose is to inform people, like my class. I'm right now informing, I'm teaching you about user interface. But I might be at the same time selling something. Maybe, maybe there is about to be a gas exploration, and I want to convince you it's good for you to let some of your, to allow or vote for this gas line to pass through your yards because it's good for you. Whether it's good or not is not my motive, is selling, right? So there are different motives. So you have different lingos. So motivation, the age group makes you pick different level or different tone or linguistics basically. And also design view, all that needs to be decided upon from the viewpoint of a user interface design. This is everything. So when you design, you not only think of the left side of the brain, you also think of the right side of the brain. You don't want this is one of the worst things. I was playing a little game called Hearts. This is one of my favorite games, by the way, card game on my phone. And the app that I downloaded, I loved it because it changes things. It changes the backgrounds, the colors, and also if I want to fix it, I can. But the music, I don't have to always listen to the same music. And the more I listen to one thing, kind of keeps track of it. I know they build a little bit of an AI in there because I pick a music for a longer time. More of the time, it uses that genre, maybe a little softer as opposed to more of a rocky kind. So this is all it has to be designed into your application. So the design of the user interface, we really rely on something called feedback. Feedback is what makes you better. You do something wrong, something right. So the right is good, the wrong, you get some feedback. And every time you get your feedback, you make yourself better and better. It's like the AI systems are like this one. They start with the bare minimum, but the more you use it, the more, and then ultimately your phone exactly knows what you're interested in. Nowadays, when I want to go out for a walk, I press, my Google button. It says current weather, okay, or temperature outside. I haven't even set the temp. It tells me today's temperature is this. It's good for walking, blah blah, because it learned over the period. So think of a user task domain. This is what you want to do, whether it's a phone you want to use or your application, you want to play a game. So that's your domain. First of all, you have a lot of requirements. This is the software engineering part of things. My app you shall be able to register, log in at courses, or your app says you need to have X, Y, and Z. So you write your requirements. This is what I covered before. So you analyze that one, okay, and then based on this one, you're gonna gather knowledge and rewrite it into specification. This is where you start writing code based on your specification. First, stuff you need. I need to add course, drop course, get CPTs and OPTs and all that stuff. It's a lot of knowledge. You write it down in some form or shape or fashion, okay, and then you refine this as you get more requirements, okay. Now at this point you are going to design the system. So you have user virtual model, okay, so pretty much make sure you support different virtual models for different people. Otherwise, imagine if the older phones, Nokia phones of 15-20 years ago, there was no way to move things around. There were actually no use. They were just buttons, right? But now you allow for more virtual machine. So, and you evaluate the results. But the key thing is, as the user goes and the decision comes, we have a feedback. Okay, this user really uses Musically more than sending text. So let's give him more features on the music. Or this person uses more stock market trades. So let's give him more sources for news. Let's give him Reuters and give him, different types of news source on New York Stock Exchange. So pretty much as you use your device or your application. But who needs to do this one? It's your app. You're designing a user interface. So basically, this eventually comes to a lot of if statements and for loops that says, if this event happened more than 3 times, add it to the preference list. Or you might have 15 items to pay attention. If you see item 8 is being used all the time, bump it up. And that's why a lot of times when you go to a website, they keep track of number of views, because based on that one, they can show you how many people. For example, if a feature has not been viewed often, you probably push it back and show less of it on the screen. So this is really the way we do things. And but the key thing I wanted to bring this part of it here. So this is basically the feedback portion, that you make it better and better and better as we go forward. So what are some dimensions of task knowledge? Okay, so for example, on the top we have, if you look at it, the things we do either is explicit or implicit. Implicit means lacks a lot of details, like let's go to dinner tomorrow night. Explicit has a lot of details. Let's go to PF Chang's at 8 p.m. with Tom, Joe, and Jeff, and Tom will pay, and the event is this, I'll pick you, all that basic stuff. So is it implicit or is it explicit? And also, is it individual, is it group? Okay. Is this just for one you? Is this just your phone, an app for you? Or is this more of a group? Like my map is for the entire students, right? So you have these four, A, B, C, D. Okay, so I want to show you something really quick here. Okay. So if I look at it, cell A, which is individual and explicit, okay, that means there's one person. What is the best way to gather knowledge, okay, or gather information? It's a lot of interviews and questionnaires, right, because it's one-on-one. What about if it's individual and implicit? So you don't have to have a lot of details. There's a lot of observations, a lot of interpretation of mental model. You just notice more people come out on Friday evenings than Tuesday evenings. More people have a tendency to, if you walk outside your neighborhood on a Sunday, it's much quieter than a Saturday, right? Because both of them are weekend. But Saturdays, people have more put it. So it's really observation. You observe people move more on Saturdays because it's more like mental model of, oh, Saturdays is more for going out versus Sundays is to relax and, take care of your laundry. And then you have groups. So we have explicit and implicit. How do I gather information in a group? Explicit. A lot of study artifacts, a lot of documentations, a lot of archives. Okay. For example, later on, we are going to have explicit information about this coronavirus, for example. How did it start? Which group was affected first? That was in Wuhan, China. How did it explicit? How did it move out? Why did it spread? 10 years ago, there was a SARS disease, extremely similar, same actually genomics with coronavirus, but why didn't that make it damage? This one did. So this is more group and explicit. So we have to do a lot of studying, a lot of archives, a lot of journal of science and publication and government studies and numbers, and of course group implicit. This is called ethnography. Okay, group, that means ethnography. Just look at the social aspects of your application. Look at the social aspects of your event. And we talked about ethnography before. Ethnography, for example, is the things you do in your software that deals with the social issues. For example, I have given you, they found out, this is actually a true story, in 70s, okay, 60s and 70s, there were a lot of air traffic accidents, a lot of airplane crashing. Have you noticed in the last 10 years, we hardly have any accidents in the US? No planes go down, okay? But in 80s, 70s, and 80s, it was a lot. It's not just the technology, because Boeing 747 was designed way before that, right? The problem was air traffic controllers are the key people. These are the ones that help you. Think of, for example, Dallas Airport. At any 3 or 4 minutes, a plane sits and a plane lands. So you want to make sure there is no accidents, right? There's only a couple of runways. If one is landing, one is taking off, remember, they don't have to hit each other. This is called the degree of separation. If two airplanes come very close to each other, within 200 or 300 even meters of each other, okay, the smaller plane could get flipped over because of the air turbulence the big plane makes. So how did we fix this problem? We found out, actually, after they studied, this is why so many accidents. It's not even airplanes' fault. They found out, oh, because air traffic controllers are very tired. After they studied, they saw most of these accidents happen during the last part of the shift of these people. So when they started, they looked at this air traffic controller for Delta. He was on a shift overtime. It was his 11th hour, so you make errors. So nowadays, they will not let air traffic controllers land or take off airplanes more than 4 hours. That doesn't mean they work 4 hour work shift. The other 4 hours they do bookkeeping and documentation, but when they deal with airplanes, is only that one. That's called ethnography. I deal with the social issue, okay, which is really accidents of aircrafts, using my software. And how do they do this one? Remember, air traffic controller, when they come in, they have to log in, right? They have to log in that my name is Bahram Khalili. I work for, DFW airport, and I need to help planes land. After 4 hours, the system would beep and says you'll be shut off after your last plane yet you land. And then, of course, you cannot land airplanes anymore. So actually, I use my software to deal with this accident. Now I'm logged off. That means I cannot help land or take off the next airplane. Somebody else needs to do it. Now I can go do other things. Okay, so it's called ethnography. This is where we have more implicit. Remember, air traffic controller is very implicit. You don't have it unless you have a specific of an accident. It's not explicit. Okay. So what are some of the guidelines for user interface design? Use a simple and natural dialogue. Okay, the simpler, the better. Speak the user's language. Okay, don't try to create one dialogue for everybody. I mean, the dialogue you have for kids is different from adults with elderly. The dialogue you do for, more savvy computer scientists is different from the ones who are not so savvy in computer science. So you have to make sure. I review some of the people's applications or user interface. I referee some of these, and I think they just generate one thing with one set of rules for everybody. Of course, it's not going to work. It's kind of like you having a professor who teaches in elementary school, and the professor teaches in the middle school, and the professor who teaches in high school or university. No, you have elementary school teachers. It's much more difficult than professors, because professors just lecture. Elementary school teachers, they need to deal with the psyche of the children. I mean, if you ever try to get 36 years old sit in the same room, then you know what I'm talking about. It's not teaching them, it's to be able to let them sit there, because every one of them is doing something, right? So it's really crowd controlling, as opposed to in the professor. In high school, students are wild. You just have to get them interested. Otherwise, they will not pay attention. They don't even think of the consequences. So we have to kind of know your audience, and also minimize memory load. The more you put things on memory, that means you have to keep referring to it. Because I showed you some of the memory loads are not very good, because it couldn't leave negative impression. Always be consistent. Okay, that's the key thing. Always handle things the same way every time you deal with this one. Otherwise, you have non-deterministic behavior. Okay, provide feedback. I told about feedback, and clearly mark exits. This is the one I told you. In 70s and 80s, ATMs didn't have clear marked exits. You could even feel in a building. If you walk in a complicated building and you don't know how to exit that building, you feel very insecure. But if you exactly see the exit signs, you say, hey, in case of a fire or an accident or an event, this is how I get out. You feel much better. The same thing with your app. It's always good to have a cancel or terminate button. I know as a designer of the application, your tendency is, the more you keep the users, like Facebook, for example, one of the measures of their success is how long a person will stay on Facebook or on, any of those products like TikTok, Facebook, Snapchat, and Instagram. A lot of these are, by the way, Facebook products. Instagram belongs to Facebook. And what happens is they measure how long would you stay on Instagram. Are you staying for 10 minutes, or what is the average? If the average user stays more than 3 hours, that's fantastic for the company, because that means they can sell more ad, or their ad views, right? So that is what you need to kind of keep in mind. So you have to have clearly marked exits. So you also let them be very comfortable. Okay, provide shortcuts. Okay, shortcuts is the most important thing. How many of you, use Office all the time? I don't think any of you can live without Control C and Control X and Control Z. Control means, copy. Control, X means cut, etc. As opposed to click on a button look at the drop down, highlight the text, and then press copy, do the same thing for paste. Instead, we just see Control C, Control P. It's very nice. Shortcuts are your best friend. Remember, we're talking user interface design. Also, give good error messages. A good error message means it's to the point and it's short. Okay, my printer wasn't working the other day. I was trying, an error message popped it. It didn't make any sense. I mean, the message was so convoluted, I would have been better off without a message. I didn't know, is it paper jam or is it a error, what it is. Then it said, click on this question mark, will tell you. Then it was 3 pages of text. I wasn't going to read it. Listen, I'm about to print something. Don't give me 3 pages of stuff. I'm not trying to design the printer. I just want to know what's wrong. Is this paper issue? Is the power issue? Is it a reset? So error message has to be first relevant, second short and to the point, and third truly help the user. Okay. And lastly, we are in summary. So let me move over so you can see me at the end at least. I have a very comfortable sofa at home. But the only problem is actually user interface design issue. Right? The only problem with it is that it has a lot of basically sun behind it. So when I go there, the sun does not let you see the screen. So in summary, the central issue is this: tune users' mental model in. If applications, they do not, if you don't tune in your user, if the user is not, like, the reason is applications like Facebooks or Instagrams or TikTok are so popular because, or games. Some of you are gamers. I know people, unfortunately too close to my family, that they have game night and they get together like 6 in the afternoon until the next morning. They're all passed out on the sofas because of the games, because they're tuned in. Okay. Also, user interface design requires input from different disciplines. It's not just, this is, remember, especially you who want to be an entrepreneur, do not just focus on computer science and math. Have people from arts, have people from economics, have people from ethnography, people from psychology. Successful companies usually have people with psychology and art in the executive board as opposed to just science. I see a lot of you guys, sometimes you come up with products. I said, well, there's 4 of us and we are all computer scientists. I said, well, there's something wrong with this right there. You need to have maybe a partner, a junior partner who's very good in psychology and in arts, and one actually in finance, right? Because if you have a very good product and you don't have a good financier, it's not going to fail. Or a good marketing and sales, right? So you always need to have a good marketing, sales, psychology, arts, and of course, the key people are the technology folks. But all in all, the user interface needs to keep a lot of these things in mind. So as a last comment with this before I stopped the recording part is, Don Norman is a genius in user interface design. I like all his videos. If you ever have a chance to see one of his talks, please do. But this lecture typically is 1 hour and 15 or 20 minutes, but I am cutting it short because I don't play that video. Instead, I'm going to provide the link for you separately, and then you watch it. And especially the 3 types he talks about in the video are very important. So take note of those 3 types. And that is it for the user interface design.